Welcome to Bad at Goodbyes. Each week on our show, we spotlight species from the IUCN Critically Endangered Red List. These are plants and animals with decreasing populations, nearing the edges of extinction. We'll share species research, information, and conservation proposals. And then we'll spend a chunk of the show opening a space for contemplation and awe. We'll perform a kind of soundscape of quietude, reflection, and maybe grieving. There is a very low likelihood that any of these species will survive the 21st century. And so perhaps we might acknowledge their passage with a moment of our attention, a recognition of our kinship, and with a commitment to personal and systemic change. Thank you for listening. On today's show, we consider the European sturgeon. The European sturgeon is a critically endangered fish native to Western Europe, today specifically restricted to the Gironde Estuary in the west coast of France, in the Gironde Department. The European sturgeon is enormous. It has a long, sort of like torpedo-shaped body, which can reach lengths of over 15 feet, and it can weigh over 800 pounds. It is an ancient species. Fossil records indicate that the sturgeon first appeared during the late Cretaceous period. This is like roughly 85 million years ago. So, dinos. This is the era of T-Rex and Triceratops and Velociraptor. And many basic attributes of the sturgeon have not changed a lot in the millennia of their slow evolution. And so this gives us a kind of echo, a glimpse at prehistoric life. For example, the European sturgeon does not have scales like we typically see on most contemporary fish. Instead, it grows 5 rows of bony plates called scutes that run along its body. These scutes are a kind of protective armor against scraping injury and predation. The European sturgeon has a pointed, wedge-shaped snout, and its mouth is located on the underside of its head. This mouth position is adapted for benthic feeding. So benthic just means the deepest zone of a body of water, like river, lake, or sea. And so the European sturgeon is a bottom feeder. Between its mouth and the tip of its snout, it grows 4 barbels. Barbels are these tubular, whisker-like sense organs. Think like catfish or carp. These are sense organs with taste buds and highly adapted nerve endings. And so the sturgeon can taste the water and detect chemicals, sense changes in water currents and pressure, all of which help it locate food, even in the murky, dark depths of their bottom-feeding habitat. There is muscle tissue in the barbels, so this allows the sturgeon to move them, and they'll use their barbels to probe sand and mud, unearthing and searching for prey. The European sturgeon's tough hide ranges from a greenish-brownish color to almost black on its dorsal side, so that's like its back. Its flanks, those are the sides of the fish, are lighter with silvery tints, and its belly, that's the bottom, is typically white. Its skeleton is cartilage, like a shark or a ray. The European sturgeon has two spiracles. These are respiratory openings located behind each eye. And so these are like tiny gill slits serving as a secondary supportive respiratory system. And so when the sturgeon is resting or feeding, its mouth may be closed, unable to draw in water for respiration. And so the spiracles allow the sturgeon to take in water, to breathe, even when its mouth is closed or obstructed. That water passes over the gills, where oxygen is extracted and transferred to the blood. Spiracles are considered like an ancient feature in fish evolution. The fossil record suggests that they were present in the earliest fish, but are super rare in today's modern fish species. So as fish evolved, more efficient methods of respiration developed, and today spiracles are just found in sturgeon, shark, ray, and skates. In my reading, I found that the sturgeon is sometimes referred to as a quote-unquote living fossil. So like a species alive today that closely resembles its ancient fossil record, suggesting they have undergone limited evolutionary change over vast time periods. I also encountered some contemporary pushback on the living fossil concept as a whole. Researchers suggest that it is kind of like a misnomer that can lead to misunderstanding or faulty assumptions. So for example, it might imply that evolution has stalled or reached a kind of apex or something, neither of which are true. Evolution, at least prior to extinction, is ever ongoing. James Rosendale, professor in the Department of Life Sciences at Imperial College London, says, quote, "Evolution cannot simply be switched off. Organisms will continue to mutate, and not all will survive to reproduce, and so evolution will occur," end quote. Rosendale, convincingly, in my mind, argues that an evolutionary heritage model offers richer understanding than the living fossils nomenclature. His suggested framework identifies species by the rarity of their evolutionary features rather than by their resemblance to ancient species. So, not for their lineage, but for their special and sometimes singular contribution to our contemporary biodiversity. There's also a related conservationist argument against the living fossils nomenclature. When we use terms like relic species or living fossils, we imply that they are like not of our time. Our language consigns that species to the past. But the dawn redwood, the platypus, and the European sturgeon are all contemporary species. They live in our world, in our time, and are vital contributors to our ecosystems. And so the concern is that calling a being like a relic or a fossil may undermine the urgency necessary to preserve and protect it. And in particular, because in most cases, the current threats to these species are not natural selection. It's not evolutionary. These are human-caused anthropogenic population threats. The European sturgeon is anadromous. This means that they are born in freshwater riverbeds, and then as young juveniles, they migrate downstream to coastal saltwaters, where they will spend most of their lives, only returning to their freshwater birthplace to mate and spawn. And so they have adaptations that allow them to regulate the salt concentration in their bodies and survive in waters with vastly different salinity levels. So, adult European sturgeon live near the coast in oceans, seas, and estuaries. Estuaries are just like the brackish transition zone where river freshwater mixes with ocean saltwater. And so the adult sturgeon leave this marine home, they swim upstream, sometimes as far as 200 to 300 miles, to return to their site of their own birth to mate. The species is generally solitary, but during this reproductive journey, which takes place every other year for males and every 2 to 4 years for females, the sturgeon gather in mass. Mating is external. At the spawning grounds, female sturgeon release their eggs into the water, and males release their sperm near the eggs, fertilization occurring totally outside the body. A single female can release hundreds of thousands of eggs during a single spawning season. The eggs have an adhesive coating that helps them stick to river bottom muds or gravel, keeping them from being swept away by the current. After spawning, the adults go their separate ways, returning downstream to the sea. There is no parental care of the eggs or young. The eggs gestate for about a week, hatch, and the young are independent from the moment of their birth. The young will spend between 2 to 6 years migrating downstream as they slowly adapt to salt water, sometimes even moving back and forth between river and sea until eventually settling into their primary coastal saltwater habitat. Female European sturgeon reach sexual maturity between 10 and 20 years, males between 10 and 12. Their estimated lifespan is approximately 50 years. In the dream, I cannot help myself. In the dream, I dream prehistoric of the 85 million years of the 1.5 million generation of sturgeon, the unfathomable heritage, the long, twisting story written in their DNA, like an eons-long flip book of swimming and evolving in the same waters. And so that is the thing for me. Each cycle, every generation to return over and over, ever and ever to their same birthplace, to spawn, to renew, to begin again. Ambassadors in a forever's long renegotiation. The old treaty between water and life. In the dream. In both their fresh and saltwater habitat, the European sturgeon feed on benthic invertebrae. So these are the worms, crustaceans, and small mollusks that live on or in the bottom sediments of the riverbed or seafloor. The European sturgeon has a protrusible mouth, meaning it can extend its mouth forward to create like a kind of tube. And they use a vacuum feeding technique, creating suction to draw prey into their mouths, like along with water and sediment. They are seasonal, opportunistic feeders, meaning their diet varies depending on the season, and also that they will consume a variety of prey, depending just on like what's available. They tend to be more active and feed more intensively at night. They are a nocturnal species. Historically, the European sturgeon was found across the European continent. In the North Sea, in the Black Sea, in the Danube, in the Rhine, in the Baltic Seas, in the English Channel, in the Mediterranean, and across the Western European Atlantic coasts. Today, the only remaining wild population is restricted to the Gironde Estuary, fed by the Gironde River in the southwestern coast of France, near the city of Bordeaux. The mature sturgeon live in the estuary, and nearby coastal Atlantic waters will then go upstream up the Gironde River to spawn. So the Gironde River runs right through the heart of the city of Bordeaux. And so the sturgeon, to spawn, is swimming upstream, navigating bridges, water taxis, houseboats, tourist river cruises, and of course like industrial and commercial waterway use. And then past Bordeaux, they still have another 80 plus miles to reach their breeding site. These deeper waters, these deeper river waters with a gravelly riverbed that's like further south toward like Toulouse and the Pyrenees. This whole bioregion is known as the Aquitaine Basin, which includes like the coastal dunes, pine forests, wetlands, and these river systems. The Gironde Estuary is formed where the Gironde and Dordogne rivers meet the Atlantic. The estuary stretches over 45 miles inland. The landscape of the estuary is marked by mudflats, sandbanks, salt marshes, and then further inland, the marshes give way to forests, vineyards, and farmlands. The climate in this region is temperate and oceanic, with warm summers, mild winters. Summer highs typically averaging in the mid-70s, winter lows rarely dipping below freezing. And the annual rainfall is moderate, averaging around 35 inches per year. The European sturgeon shares the Gironde Estuary with northern pintail, snails, common cordgrass, European otter, gorse, Alice shad, red deer, sea purslane, gray heron, marine bristol worms, mallard, European eel, sowbugs, common reed, possum shrimp, sea lamprey, maritime pine, wild boar, European flounder, aquatic earthworms, great egret, sea couchgrass, mussels, ripple heron, and many, many more. Historically, the European sturgeon's population was profoundly reduced by a range of anthropogenic, that's human-caused, anthropogenic activities. So habitat encroachment and habitat reduction through like direct development of the river systems, so dams, locks, building canals, bridges, and riverbed gravel dredging, which specifically affects their spawning grounds. And then there's commercial and industrial activities as well, so shipping and other waterway traffic and water pollution from industrial dumping and agricultural runoff. Today, most of those threats persist. They continue to affect the current population of European sturgeon, with the new additional threat of bycatch. So contemporary industrial fishing does not look like perhaps what we imagine or have seen on like maybe reality TV. This is not like a dozen folks on a skiff braving the high seas. These are massive 1,000-ton, 400-foot plus industrial trawlers with like 100 crew members. They require powerful engines, guzzling diesel fuel and generating greenhouse gases. And the bottom trawlers that impact our sturgeon population release these massive weighted nets that scrape the seabed over a roughly 300-foot area and ensnare everything in its path, catching hundreds of thousands of fish in a single haul. Fishing of the European sturgeon is globally prohibited, but nevertheless, bycatch occurs when the sturgeon is caught in these nets. And so I don't want to be too grim here, but I do want to be really clear, like, bycatch means dead. This isn't like your granddad in a yellow slicker on his dinghy pulling a hook out and tossing him back. This is thousands of fish out of water, writhing for breath, caught in a mesh. Complicating this is that industrial fisheries, concerned about penalties, are generally disincentivized from reporting bycatch. So it's hard for conservationists to know how widespread this problem is. And lastly, human-induced climate change will likely prove a near-term threat to the European sturgeon. Global warming means that Atlantic Ocean undersea currents are changing. So we expect this to have a broad impact on water temperature, ocean salinity, sea level, and weather patterns, all of which will likely affect the remaining European sturgeon population. Management, protection, and conservation of the European sturgeon has been ongoing for over 100 years. For example, in 1915, baited hook lines were prohibited in the Ida River in Germany to protect juvenile sturgeon. And in 1932 in Poland, fishing of the European sturgeon was totally outlawed. And yet, throughout the 20th century, their population plummeted. Concern led to the initiation of captive breeding and artificial reproduction programs in France in the 1990s. Unfortunately, the success of these efforts was fairly limited, with initial re-releases in the early 2000s resulting in a survival rate of only 3 to 5%. These programs continue, though, and are expanding with the reintroduction of the species in Germany, the Netherlands, the Baltic Sea, and continued restock and monitoring of the Gironde population in France. Conservation of the species is also complicated by human behavior and bureaucracy and social and governmental systems. And so you'll recall that it takes about a dozen years for juvenile sturgeon to reach reproductive age, and then another half dozen years for any of their new spawn to return to the sea. So evaluating the success of any reintroduction effort is like a 15 to 20-year process. And observations of my species seems to suggest we have a short memory and seem disinclined toward long-term planning and disinclined to fund things that do not have immediate gratification. As an example, a 1999 report indicated planned releases of the European sturgeon in over 10 European nations. But now here, 25 years later, it appears that only 3 of those programs remain. The European sturgeon has been considered critically endangered on the IUCN Red List since 1996, and their population is currently in decline. Counts estimate that less than 50 reproducing adult European sturgeon remain in the wild. Information for today's show about the European sturgeon was compiled from Fish and Fisheries Series, Volume 29, Developments in Environmental Biology of Fishes, Volume 17, Transactions of the American Fisheries Society, Volume 55, Number 1, the journal Diversity, Volume 15, Scientific Data, Volume 9, July 2022, Frontiers in Ecology and Evolution, Volume 10, from the IUCN, from the Journal of Applied Ichthyology, Volume 15, from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Fisheries Species Directory, from Systematic Biology, Volume 73, Issue 1, from Molecular Phylogenetics and Evolution, Volume 94, Part A, from the Bulletin of the Spanish Institute of Oceanography, Volume 16, and from Wikipedia. For more information about the conservation and protection of the sturgeon, please visit the World Sturgeon Conservation Society at wscs.info. And so now I would like to perform some music in hopes of opening a space to contemplate the other lives with whom we share our precious earth. I do want to clarify, though, that this music is not like for the European sturgeon. I don't mean to like extract meaning from the sturgeon or want to put meaning upon it. Instead, this music and this, I guess, moment, this point in time is a pause to consider my own relationship to other life, particularly life with decreasing populations. And so I will sit in the space of sound and awe, contemplation, and I warmly invite you to join me. I honor the life force of the European sturgeon. I commit to holding its human name in my record. I am grateful to have shared time on our planet with this being, and I lament the ways in which I and my species have harmed and diminished this species. I grieve. And so, in the name of the European sturgeon, I pledge to reduce my consumption, my carbon footprint, and my wastefulness. I pledge to acknowledge and attempt to address the costs of my actions and inactions. And I pledge to resist the harm of any plant and animal kin or their habitat by individuals, corporations, and governments. I forever pledge my song to the witness and memory of all life, to a broad celebration of biodiversity, and to the total liberation of all beings. This has been Attic Goodbyes. Thank you for listening. Till next time, let's take care of each other and all of our kin. Goodbye.